to order at 7:00 p.m. Jennifer, may I please have a roll call?
Mr. Baser.
Here.
Ms. Buden.
Here.
Ms. Christian. Here. Ms. Oliver.
Here.
Mr. Patel.
Here.
Ms. Becker Bishop.
Here.
Ms. Nicole.
Okay, we have quorum. Moving on to the consent agenda. Are there any items on the consent agenda that anybody would like to have pulled out and move to new business? Seeing none, may I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So.
Thanks, Janet. Can I get a second? Thanks, Nimesh. Jennifer, may I have a roll call vote?
Mr. Baser.
Yes.
Ms. Buden.
Yes.
Ms. Christian.
Yes.
Ms. Oliver.
Yes.
Mr. Patel.
Yes.
Ms. Becker Bishop.
Yes. Great, and we will now move into public comment. I am gonna ask them. Yeah, let me grab it. Thank you. Here. Got it. Okay. Before we start, I would remind speakers that you have 5 minutes each. We will be timing. I believe Kelly, are you? Oh, it's on the screen. Amazing. Thanks, Erin. And we will go in the order in which people signed in. So first up, we have Marla Israel.
Can I get a clarification? Is this as to items on the agenda? Or?
Yes, we do public comment differently than the village does. All of our public comment is once at the beginning.
Thank you.
Yes.
This is tall. Good evening. My name is Dr. Marla Sussman Israel. I live with my husband, Bob Israel, at 1431 Hemlock Knoll Terrace in Northbrook, Illinois. Bob and I have been residents of Northbrook for over 25 years. We raised our twins, Rebecca and Samuel, in Northbrook. And during those years when my children were growing up, the library was a second home to my children, who are now 32 years old. It was here at this library that their nannies brought them for books and story time and arts and crafts. And then they came here to read to young children and read with young children as part of their community service projects. And as high schoolers, they came here for concerts, movies, and the study room. And now as adults living in Chicago and DC respectively, both Becca and Sam are avid card-carrying library users. And I credit this community that was built here in Northbrook Public Library for developing this important civic value they demonstrate in their adult lives today. So with this history, I felt it was my obligation to give back to the library when asked to serve on the Room Rental Policy Review Working Group. And in light of recent national and local events, the process, facilitated by Kate Hall and Biz Lindsay Ryan, I felt was intentional, thoughtful, and respectful. And as one who identifies as a proud Jew and Zionist, I felt this experience truly exemplified the mission of our library here in Northbrook to create community and champion intellectual freedom and provide open access to knowledge in a welcoming and inclusive environment. However, as I have expressed through written correspondence to this library board and Ms. Hall, I do not believe our work is done, and I do not believe the room rental policy that you have before you tonight is ready for approval and adoption. In particular, the draft revisions of the Public Code of Behavior still do not provide enough detail to ensure that free speech is protected while ensuring a safe and inclusive community. I submit that the Public Code of Behavior must be further revised to state clearly that it is not enough to prohibit loud, abusive, or threatening language and/or behavior. I submit the revised language must explicitly state that language and behavior that is intended to intimidate, dehumanize, demonize, or delegitimize any group of people or individuals is not permitted in this library and must be clearly stated in the revised Public Code of Behavior. And without this clear explanation explicitly detailed for the renter of the library space, the renter's application for renting our rooms, which is a privilege within a public space, is arbitrary and capricious and is therefore unenforceable. While some may say the working group was only asked to look at the rental policy and the public code of behavior is an issue for another time, as currently written, the revised rental policy refers the user to the public code of behavior, and therefore it is not sufficient for one policy to be fully updated, while the other is not if they are so conjoined. And as we have seen in these last few tragic weeks, most people unfortunately believe in freedom of speech for me, but not for thee. And often they care much more about a particular constitutional right if it is something that protects people that they agree with. And that's not the intent nor the aspired impact of my objections here. I aspire to protect the free speech rights and the inclusive community of this library for all of Northbrook citizenry. I want all families to find a welcoming home in the Northbrook Public Library, just as my family always has. And so I urge the board to not stop this important work. Please do not approve a policy that is not fully finished. Please, before voting on this revised rental policy, explicitly commit to finishing the revisions for the public code of behavior. Without a complete revision of the public code of behavior, the revised room rental policy will not achieve the dual outcomes of preserving free speech while creating an inclusive community for all. Thank you.
Nancy Goodman.
Good evening, everybody. My name's Nancy Goodman, and like Marla, I was on the working group for the rental, the meeting room policy, as it came to be called. And I very much appreciate the chance that I had to have input on this policy and the revisions it needed. And Kate and Julie and the board members and our facilitator were, as Marla said, were thoughtful and respectful and listened to what we had to say and took our comments and concerns into account and made changes accordingly. And so I say thanks to everyone for that. There were two areas, though, that I felt like the revisions didn't feel quite adequate to me. Those are the insurance and indemnity areas. And I thought for the board to have a chance to consider those and discuss them felt like it was a worthwhile thing. Especially as the revision process stemmed from the concerns that came up with the showing of the Israelism film, or the cancellation of it, and the ACL response, that there not be any barriers in the policy that would limit our patrons' First Amendment rights. And I feel that both the insurance requirement and the indemnity clause still do present something of a barrier for full use of the library by everyone. The proof of insurance for use of the auditorium feels burdensome to me. Established groups might have insurance policies that they could, from which they could provide a certificate of insurance. Kind of an easy and automatic thing to do for a particular event. Individuals or new groups or groups that are just pretty informal and don't have any funding would not have insurance. You can't get such a certificate on your homeowner's policy. This creates a burden. What are they to do? While I was told there hadn't been any pushback for the request for insurance in the past, I think there was about the Israelism film of what burdens there might be placed upon those applicants. And we don't know that there aren't other potential users of the library who might want to use the auditorium who wouldn't even try to apply because they'd think, I can't provide the insurance that they need. So I think there is a concern that there are those who might not be able to make full use of the library given this requirement. I don't think we want to make it onerous to use the library or to make it even somewhat difficult or costly. I was told that reasonable options are available for insurance, but what's reasonable to some might not be reasonable to the others. I don't know what those costs would be, but there's likely would be a cost. And for groups that don't have any way to fund such things, that would be a difficulty. In our process, we used a comparison in the working group, comparison with other local libraries, and not everyone requires that we have that they have insurance. Some of the libraries changed their policies to respond to the concerns we had after the Israelism situation. They may have to change theirs back. Highland Park changed theirs and changed it back. Most of the libraries don't require insurance. I don't know that we have to. And the indemnity clauses also feels to me like a burdensome requirement. It would stipulate that the applicant would be responsible for whatever happens, whether it's bad behavior or damage caused by attendees, whether it's someone trips on a stair that might not have been well lit, that would really be the library's problem to solve. Those shouldn't be the responsibility of the applicant. So it feels that that is also a burden to the full use and free speech rights of our patrons. And since other libraries in our comparison group, Highland Park, Winnetka, Skokie, don't have any such clause. Some others do, but it's not universal or standard, and I don't think it's anything that we need to include. Thank you.
Lee Goodman?
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to agree with everything my wife said so beautifully. I am a retired attorney who happened to have worked in the insurance field. I wrote insurance policies. I litigated insurance coverage claims and that sort of thing. So let me give you a real quick idea of why you've got a problem here. Insurance is meant to change things from normal to not normal. Normal is someone walks in here, trips over the carpet. You knew the carpet was ragged. You never did anything about it. They sue you, maybe you're responsible. Not normal is someone walks in here, there's nothing wrong with your carpet, they fall over. Why should you have to pay anything? And you don't. And that's normal. That's what the law says. Indemnity says we're going with not normal. Someone's going to have to pay for damage someone else causes, whether they had any control over it, whether they had any liability for it, whether they were at fault or not. So why would anyone put not normal into any kind of contract? Well, it probably goes back to ships at sea. When you'd say goodbye to the ship and there were no telegraphs and there was no way of knowing if the ship never showed up, what happened to it? Whose fault was it? So they would agree ahead of time. If this ship doesn't show up, that's your problem. Well, we're not faced with that situation today. So what happens when you change normal to not normal? Well, as was pointed out, some people won't be able to get insurance. Some people will be intimidated. I don't think there's a whole lot of people in this town who've done more organizing on issues than I have. And I can tell you, people are pretty hesitant to come out and do anything in public on an issue. It takes some coaxing. It takes some feeling safe. And if you say to them, by the way, you got to be responsible if the roof falls in, they're not going to show up. They're not going to do it. So there's an expense in public policy. So why are these clauses sometimes found in contracts? Because you will find them in contracts. The only time you're going to ever find them in a contract is when you've got a bully on one side and a victim on the other. When you've got one party that has so much power that they can insist that the other side be responsible for something that normal says they shouldn't have to be. And that's why courts sometimes throw these things out. They frequently do in consumer contract situations. So maybe in a commercial setting, if you got Donald Trump insisting that someone indemnifies him, maybe they're going to feel like they have to go along with it. But this library shouldn't be bullying its patrons or the public. It shouldn't be that entity which is victimizing the very people it's trying to serve. You should be the ones who say, just like you do with the books in your collection, we want new ideas. We want people to feel comfortable. We want them to talk about things. We want to provide a space where people can come together and do the things that they can only do here because, you actually have a monopoly. If people can't assemble here, they can't assemble anywhere else. Oh, maybe they can go to someone's church, but maybe it's not their church and they don't feel comfortable going there. This is it. This is the only place that people have to be comfortable. So this should not be the place that takes normal and turns into abnormal. So why are these contracts in contracts? Well, usually they're not actually. I can't tell you how. Well, your lawyer will be able to tell you. The first thing you do, you get a contract from the other side, you see an indemnity clause, you pick up the phone, you say, by the way, we're scratching that out. And the other lawyer says, of course you are, because no one agrees to those things. It's one of these junk provisions you throw in so that the lawyers feel like, okay, I can show my client I did something. I got rid of this clause. It's not essential. It doesn't have to be there. It's onerous. It's burdensome. So the insurance, it's going to deter people from using your rooms. I don't think you want to do that. The indemnity, it's not normal, institutionalized for no good reason. It's not like me to give up time that I could be talking. Invite questions, I could just say, I think I have a pretty good idea how this library functions. You don't have to do this, and there's one more reason. I knew there was something else. There's one more reason why I don't think you want to. Because you already have insurance coverage for absolutely anything that anyone might indemnify you for. All you're doing is saying to someone, you have to pay twice for something we've already paid for. You got to buy an insurance policy even though we already have the policy. There's no reason to do it. You've got this covered. All you're doing by requiring an indemnity or insurance is discouraging people from using the library. Thank you.
You are, of course, all welcome to stay, and we will move into staff reports.
Just a couple things I wanted to remind everyone that October is just around the corner, and with October comes One Book, One Northbrook, and we will be having our whole host of events on Symphony of Secrets by Brendan Slocum, including a visit on October 15th at 7 p.m. by the author in the auditorium, which we're very excited about. So if you are interested in attending anything, I would register now, because I think that things are filling up quickly. And we're very excited this weekend to be at Schermerfest in Village Green, provided the weather behaves. Linda has been carefully watching the weather, hoping that it doesn't rain. And I also wanted to just do a shout out to our events production staff, Erin Ashman, Ariel Raybuck, who worked very closely with the Village Community Commission to put on the program we had last Sunday in partnership with Braver Angels and the Northbrook Village Commission on helping people learn how to have civil conversations with people they disagree with. And we had 50 people in attendance. It was really great. And we very much look forward to continuing our partnership with the Village Commission and hoping that we will be able to continue to offer these types of programs, which are definitely in demand and much needed, I think, in the community and in the world. So that was a really wonderful event that I'm not going to say dragged my husband to. He came willingly, but we both very much enjoyed it. So thank you for that. And I also wanted to turn things over to Kelly to give us a quick update on our access control RFP.
Yes. Did we do the consent agenda?
We did.
Okay, just making sure.
It passed.
Great. Okay. So updates on our intrusion alert and access control RFP, which was released at the end of August. We did have a mandatory walkthrough for this bid process. And I'm happy to report we had 17 companies in attendance for the mandatory walkthrough. And 29 people. It was huge. And went really well. And we had a lot of great questions. We've posted some answers to those questions on the website. And proposals are due next Friday, September 26th. We'll do a public opening of the bids at 10 a.m. And then take them back and do some review with Jaffe Emergency Services and our facilities and IT teams, and hope to bring 2 to 3 bids for you all to review and potentially approve at the October board meeting.
Thank you so much, Kelly. And that's a perfect segue to introduce Jason Halleck, who is our new facilities manager, who is going to do a much better job than I could have giving you some of his background and share a little bit about what he's been doing in the few months that he has been here at the library.
All right, hello, everyone. My name is Jason, as Kate said. Just to share a little bit about myself, I was hired in May as the chief engineer / facilities manager for the library. I've been an engineer for the better part of 22 years. During that time, I've worked at numerous high-rise buildings featuring a wide range of HVAC systems, fire life safety systems, and building automation systems. My last facility was the historic Chicago Union Station, which is a 1.7 million square foot facility, so a little bit bigger than the library, but great place to learn a lot at. Now a little bit about the library. The general condition of the library is good. A few of the preventive maintenance and housekeeping items have been neglected over the past few years. That's where I come in. I'm confident that with some time, effort, and hard work, these issues can and will be corrected, and the building's overall performance and efficiency will be improved. During the last few months since I've been hired, I made the following observations and corrections. Start with the air handlers. They provide all the air for the library, so pretty important piece of equipment. All the fan coils have been cleaned in-house by us. The fan motors, fan bearings have been greased, the belts have been checked, and the filters for all the fans were changed at the end of June. Going forward, I want to go with changing the filters quarterly. That way, the efficiency of the fans will be better by ensuring that the filters do not get dirty and they do not impede the airflow for the fans and the fan motors. Currently, I'm working with Siemens on the BAS, which is another very important piece of equipment for the library. BAS stands for Building Automation System. That's what controls all the equipment out in the field. So we are going through, they are training me on the ins and outs of the BAS system because I've worked on plenty, but each system is different. So I have to learn it also. We're working together to check all the VAVs, which stands for variable air volume boxes, to make sure that they are functioning correctly and to correct any deficiencies. This is going to take some time because I need to experience all 4 seasons here at the library to experience the weather changes and see how the equipment reacts to the different outside air temperatures throughout the year. So this winter will be very important because I'm going to learn a lot about the building as the weather gets colder and make sure she operates good. I'm also working with Siemens. I'm also working with all the vendors for the library to make sure that I build a strong relationship with them so that we can work together to use our resources together to make the library operate as efficiently as possible. For example, I brought in Lionheart in June for the generator, the emergency generator. So they performed a load bank test and tested both ATSs. ATS stands for automatic transfer switch, which we have a power bump or lose power. Automatic transfer switch will switch over to the emergency power. Starts the generator, and that way the lights come on. Anything that's connected, fire pump will run in the loss of power. And the sliding doors will work also because they're connected. So I brought in Lionheart. They are probably the best at dealing with generators in the industry. So the generator passed with flying colors, ran great, passed the load bank test. The ATS is passed, so that was a plus. Everything looks good there. Then moving forward in their preventive maintenance program. So as a part of ABM Services, I'm currently working on building the preventive maintenance program for all the equipment, which will then go into an Angus software system, which will then spit out work orders for us to do the preventive maintenance on all the equipment. That'll be weekly, monthly, quarterly, and annually, semi-annually on some of the equipment. This proactive approach will help mitigate potential issues before they escalate, ensuring that the library operates at optimal performance levels. The idea is to be proactive instead of reactive, try and catch something before it breaks. Now, stuff breaks, that's why I have a job. I'm gonna catch everything, but the idea with the preventive maintenance program is that you stay on top of the equipment, keep it running at its optimal performance, and that way we can check it and see if a bearing is going bad. You can hear it or whatnot, and then get it replaced in time before it's a catastrophic shutdown. And then training and development. I'm investing significant hands-on time in training and developing the existing facility staff. So by enhancing their skills and knowledge, we can foster a more effective team that is capable of handling a wide range of operational challenges. Also, training them on the existing building automation system, which is BAS for short, as well as regular updates on best practices, safe practices for equipment maintenance. I've implemented new log sheets for the generator, the chiller, boilers, domestic water readings, electrical meter readings, gas meter readings, condenser water connectivity testing, which is only done during the summer. That's to check the water from the cooling tower that's going through the multi-stack chiller. And we want to stay on top of that because the water gets fouled up, then you're gonna foul up the tubes inside the chiller. Chiller's not gonna work as efficiently as it should. It'll cause problems down the road. Again, the idea is to be proactive rather than reactive. Some of the projects we're working on, it's in the packet. We've painted all the mechanical room floors on the first floor here. I want to clean all the mechanical spaces, keep them clean, paint the floor, so that way when workers, my team's here, they see that it's clean and they will keep it clean. And then when we have outside contractors, vendors here, they know to respect the library, respect mechanical spaces, so that everybody sees that if we keep our house clean, they're gonna keep it clean and work efficiently when they're working here. And then lastly, I just want to, it's been a pleasure starting here a few months back and working with Kate, Kelly, and Anna, and all the department managers, because coming from Union Station, it was a great place to learn, but it was pretty hectic, and seeing the way the library team here works and the way the pride they have and the care they have for the library, it's a nice change of pace from what I came from. So I appreciate that. So thank you guys. And that's it. If you have any questions, please. Yeah. I'm not big on speaking to a group of people, so. Yeah.
We appreciate you being here. Any questions for Jason?
I guess I just have a quick comment. Thanks for the overview. It was really helpful to hear, and I'm especially glad to hear about sort of the training aspect that you brought in. I think that's really nice in the new log sheets.
Huge on, and they're probably sick of me saying it. I know the guys in the facility are sick of me saying it, but I'm big on teamwork makes the dream work. I took out a book on motivational sayings at the library here. Yeah.
Special break.
I think I'm gonna get a late charge on it though. So, but no, I'm real big on teamwork makes, like, I want them to know that I will take the garbage out. I don't care. I will do what, like, I don't think any job's above me, and I want them to feel the same way. So that we can all work together to keep the library clean, keep it operating efficiently, and get the equipment up to where it needs to be, then go from there.
Question with you mentioned that you're meeting with a lot of the newer vendors, whether it's Siemens or someone that you're less familiar with. With these new log sheets, are you sharing the preventive maintenance plan with them to make sure that they would be in agreement?
The chiller log, like we're doing that daily. So every day we're logging the chiller when it's running. So that way, that gives us a base point on, like, I'm also logging the pumps, the condenser water pumps and the chill water pumps. So that way we know if there's a change in pressure or something, we're gonna catch it. And then this is something I can share with thermal systems, that they do the annual work on the chiller.
Yep. So
They'll have a baseline on how the chiller's been run, which we log the temps, condenser water temp, chill water temp, the pressures. And it's takes a little bit of time to log it, like a half an hour, but it's not the end of the world. And then the chemical testing, we're not testing for chemicals. We don't use chemical here in the tower, but we're testing the connectivity, because the connectivity of the water is important to keep it below 1,200 parts per million. So we test that 3 days a week. The controller, the chemical controller tests it also, but we're testing it with the separate pen that I got from the chemical treatment company we use. So that way we know that the sensor's reading correctly, so that, again, we can stay on top of it. And if we see something with the chiller going south, we can catch it before we have to shut it down and then the library gets too hot.
Can I make one comment? Sorry to interrupt. We're not changing vendors. Jason is just trying to develop relationships. So he is learning from them as much as he's showing them that he's putting in these checks so that he can help them when he calls them to, when we need them.
Yeah, I wanna work with them so that we can, the idea is that we can both be, the relations are built in the past with contractors. You try to work together so you can both be rock stars. You know what I mean? Like, I don't want to blame them. I don't want them to blame me. I want to work together so that we can both look good and keep the library running. Excellent. that's the plan. That's what I hope to accomplish here. What I think I will
I
accomplish.
think I understand these, but I assume that these have to do with our,
Those are the pumps.
So the first page on everyone is the old,
The old,
the
that's-
before.
that's what I,
Yes.
yeah.
And so what we did was we had to go in and paint we painted the pads also. So I painted all the pads, that's the concrete that the equipment sits on. I painted all the pads yellow. That way, when you first walk in the boiler room, you have to turn on a light switch, but if you came in from another door, you might not see that way. You see the pads, nobody trips. That's the main reason why you do that in mechanical. But
No, that's wonderful.
it also looks clean. It looks a lot better. That
Certainly
way,
does.
the idea is when thermal systems is here working on the pumps, like we have to pull the strainers in that first picture. That way, they'll respect the space also. You know what I mean? The idea is we keep it clean, so then the contractors that are here respect it, and my team respects it then, and we keep it clean.
It's fabulous.
It's much easier to see.
It's cleaner now. The paint eventually will get scuffed up and not look like stuff, but mop the floor and.
Any other questions for Jason?
Yeah, I want to second, the kind words that Ramesh said in terms of the important work that you and your team do.
Thank
You enable the entire community to be able to enjoy and utilize the library, and so thank you for that. You spoke a lot about the building automation system, and in your report talked about, both you being in a place where you're getting to understand the system, but that also that the system is closer to the end of its life cycle.
Yeah,
I'm wondering if you could speak a little bit more about that, and when you see having a strong enough sense of how the system is working to be able to better, or how it's working for the building to be able to then make recommendations around
it'll probably
its
be
life
like
cycle and
like a
replacement.
year to get, like to go through the seasons, and then
Mhm.
I'll be checking the boxes as I go, the VAVs, which have reheat coils and everything, and then the system, unfortunately, it's powered by Apogee, it's called, that's the program.
Yeah.
That's like everything else, technology is moving so fast, those softwares aren't supported as you go forward. It's still supported, we can get parts if need be, but eventually that will have to be changed just because it's an outdated software. So that would be the front end, but to do that, I want to have all the boxes in the field working correctly so that, because again, the BAS just controls, it tells the equipment what to do, but if the equipment's not working to its top efficiency, then it's not gonna, you know what I mean? It'll tell a valve to close, but the valve might not close. Then you're not really controlling the temperature as well. So you have to make sure all the boxes work good, then tackle the BAS part, kind of together, if that makes sense.
Yes, yes,
So-
thank you for that clarification, appreciate it.
It'll be a long process, but we'll get there.
Thank you.
Oh, you will.
Any other questions?
Mm.
Well, Jason, thank you for being here, and thank you for everything you have done and are continuing to do. Anna, I think, is actually sleeping through the night now. Can you confirm?
I'm
and-
very happy he's here.
Yes, so, and we've heard great things about you from Anna, Kate, and Kelly, so thank you for your continued work.
I'll sleep now that I'm done speaking. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Diego. We'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, moving into board member reports.
Well, I just wanted to say, as a member of the Villages Community Commission, wanted to thank Kate for her kind words about the event on Sunday with Braver Angels. As she noted, it was, I think, a big success. You know, it's just, 50 people attended, and all of them seemed to really lean into the purpose of the event, much needed, and we were just delighted and hope we can continue to do similar sorts of events. So.
I attended the History of Jewish Desserts program that Ariana Brooks did, and I have not recovered from needing a marble bread fix. So it was super well attended. It was the night of the Bears home opener, which I realized there might not be a lot of overlap in that audience. but I was there in a Bears hoodie. And there were probably, I don't know what the final count was, but it looked like between 80 and 100 people there. Maybe not. You don't have to look.
It was 68.
Okay, it was a lot of people.
I would.
And a lot of talking about Jewish desserts. It was delightful, and Ariana did a great job. So kudos to her and to Jill.
Did you bring any samples?
The word on the street is that Adam's mom is a phenomenal baker and is willing to supply samples.
And I'm sure she would be thrilled. So,
We might have to just test so
Yeah.
that in case we need a, you know.
yeah.
Any other board member reports? Moving into unfinished business, data analysis, professional development support proposal update.
I love the long titles. I'm sorry, you guys. I'm sorry. I just want it to be very clear for the public what we're talking about. So after last month, Mallory, Edgar, and I met to work on the proposal that the board asked for about doing some professional development around data analysis. After our talk, we realized that what we really needed to get was some more information from staff. So we are going to be gathering information from staff, surveying what areas would be of most importance to them so that we can make sure that we're tailoring the needs of the staff. And I, of course, had a lot of ideas, but we want to see what staff have. So we do not have a proposal for this month, but Mallory is pretty confident that, you know, we will be able to bring one back to the board in October for you to take a look at. So more on that to come.
As part of the survey, is it possible to say, what do they feel that they could teach? Or what skills do they have that they would feel comfortable?
So we're kind of taking a two-pronged approach with the survey. Part one is, what skills do you feel you already have? And then part two is, what skills would you like to develop? And
But that's different than what skills would you feel comfortable sharing?
And so I don't think that, so we did not ask that. And I would say that I would see that coming up as part of the training that they would be doing with Mallory, of saying like, hey, I actually am really good at this. Like I know like Susan Wolf, our adult services manager, and I have spoken a lot about survey design. She's taken some courses on it. She doesn't feel competent enough, but I think to be able to like teach others, she has taught herself. And so I think that with this, I would see that being a thing that would then launch people into feeling more comfortable. And I think that's something that we could perhaps add into it, of like, how do we get people feeling confident to be able to not only learn it, but to be able to teach it to others. So.
How does that survey relate to sort of the two, like the two areas that the board approved last time to explore as far as
Yeah,
narrowing
so-
those categories?
So we did not, we already know that with the with the internal data dashboard, and then also the IPLAR and ILLINET survey analysis, we know that there's opportunities for training there. So that's an area that we'd already identified, like in addition to Mallory doing the work, training people along with that. So we did not ask about that in the survey, because that is not something that, like, that's already an identified need. We wanted to find out, like, are people more interested in learning more about data visualization, or are they more interested in survey design? Or are they more interested in understanding how to do qualitative data analysis? Or are they more interested in learning better how to clean up, you know, quantitative data? There's so many different areas that we could focus on, and each of those have so many layers to them that we want to kind of not try to do everything, but to drill in on what is going to be the most usable and most impactful for the work that we're doing. So. Any other questions?
Moving into new business, we have our fiscal year 25 audit presentation featuring Ed. Welcome, Ed.
Thanks for having me here tonight. You want, you can put a timer on. Thanks for having me here. We were out doing the audit work primarily in, I believe, late July, early August, and then wrap things up after leaving the field. Our audit manager who was on the engagement this year, Andrew Miller. I think he spoke to you guys in the past. Actually, once he finished the audit here, he went on leave to have a kid. So, yeah, his wife. I was able to finish things up and he left it in pretty good shape for me. So I appreciated that. When we're doing the audit, one of the things we're doing, the audit is designed to give reasonable but not absolute assurance that the financial statements are fairly presented. And one of the things we do is we look at the internal control structure and walk through transactions to see that those internal controls are being followed. Now, a financial statement audit doesn't necessarily give an opinion on internal control, but if we were to identify any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies in the internal controls, we would be required to bring those to your attention in a management letter. But we did not have any of that. We found that the controls were operating as designed and were effectively designed. So our management letter consists only of another matter, what we call another matter, which is just kind of give you notification or notice of upcoming standards that have been issued but not yet effective by the Governmental Accounting Standards Board, or GASB. So GASB issues standards periodically, and then as they become effective, we're required to implement those standards. This year, there was one standard became effective this year. It related to compensated absences. So in the past, you've always kind of accrued a liability for vacation that's been earned by employees, but they haven't taken it yet. Because should the employee leave, you'd be liable to pay those employees out. Other types of compensated absences, like primarily sick pay, there was a lot of discrepancy in practice as to whether or not a business would accrue for sick pay. I mean, it's been earned, so it's in that way it's liability, but in many instances not paid out when an employee leaves. So a lot of places would not accrue that liability. But this new standard that came out meant to clear up any diversity in practice, clearly indicated that you would need to accrue a liability for that earned sick time. And then you were with the calculation, or the liability was an estimate of what you expect that might be paid out, that's been earned, that might be paid out in the future, which is a difficult calculation to do, but they kind of said you kind of base it on what's been paid out in recent years and things like that. So we came up with that liability and recorded that this year. And the only other adjustments we made to the financial statements related to the net pension liability and the other post-employment benefit liability, which is something we adjust every year to the actuarial reports we get, because they change every year and they usually come in and we with Anna, we sit down and review those reports, make sure the assumptions being used and things like that to come up with the liability is, reasonable. And we booked that liability. Now, your net pension liability, your employees are members of IMRF. You're actually part of the villages group, I guess to say. So the villages auditors provide us a calculation of they allocate a percentage of the salary of the IMRF liability and the deferred inflows and outflows related to that IMRF liability based on the number of employees and the contributions and things like that. And it usually works out to close to 20%, a little under 20%. And so that liability is provided to us during the course of the audit, which is why it's recorded as an adjustment and not booked earlier, because it comes from the village's auditors. One thing, all three of these entries that we talked about, so the net pension liability, the other post-employment benefit liability, and the accrued sick time only affect the government-wide financial statements. So when you're looking at the audit report, there's two sets of financial statements. There's government-wide financial statements, and then there's fund financial statements. The government-wide is a full accrual, long-term focused statements. So there's long-term assets and long-term liabilities are recorded in those government-wide financial statements that are not recorded in the fund financial statements. The books you keep on a month-to-month basis, budget you make, that's the fund financial statements. So the government-wide, we then take those fund financial statements and convert them to the government-wide financial statements by accounting for these long-term assets, long-term liabilities. And again, it's your fixed assets, it's your depreciation, your net pension liability, your other post-employment benefit liability, your long-term debt. Those things are in those government-wide financial statements. They're not in the fund financial statements. So from a long-term perspective, the full accrual perspective, the government had for the current year, there was a decrease in net position, so a loss of about 139,000. So your net position at the end of the year is still 18.5 million on a full accrual basis. A lot of that is fixed assets. In the fund financial statements, overall, you had for the year, you had a positive bottom line of about 470,000. And those, so you report on a fund basis, you report your general fund, which is most of your activity. Then you have a fund for your retirement responsibilities, IMRF and FICA. You have a debt service fund, which accounts for the taxes collected and the repayments of taxes collected for long-term debt and the subsequent repayment of them. And then a capital improvement fund, which is monies you set aside for major projects and things like that. Your general fund, before taking into account any transfers at the end of the year, had a positive bottom line of 780,000 this year. Most of that balance is transferred out to the capital projects fund, or capital improvements, I should say. It's kind of set aside for future improvements. Your IMRF retirement fund is generally pretty much a break-even fund as well. And the debt service fund accounts for, as I mentioned, the properties taxes levied and then used to pay the debt. This year, you had the new debt issue in the year under audit. We issued about $3.8 million in new debt. And the proceeds of that new debt, plus the premium received on that debt of about 430,000, was then used to pay down older debt that was being carried at a higher rate. And so you're going to generate some nice cash flow savings over the next several years as a result of that refinancing. That net transaction, so the proceeds came in, they really didn't come in, they got sent to an escrow agent, which then paid down the debt. So the net effect of that transaction on the current year current year income statement and the debt service fund was kind of a wash. But it will generate, as I mentioned, some nice long-term cash flow savings. And then the capital improvement fund you were able to add an additional 477,000 to that fund balance. And so you have a little over 8 million in that capital improvement fund, which will then you'll be able to use to fund major improvements and repairs and improvements to the library facility, help to maintain the facility. So overall, it was a solid year financially for the library. Again, this year, the budget versus the actual results are also in this report. And you'll find that in general, revenues right around budget and expenses were under budget. And when you look at the expenses under budget, it's really across the board. It's not any one category of expenses that you saw all the savings. It was really generally, you recognize savings versus budget and pretty much across the board. So a well-managed fiscal year for the library.
Thanks so much, Ed. Any questions?
Can I just say one thing about the debt? Yes, new debt was issued, but the village does a very nice job of looking at debt and taking advantage of opportunities to get debt at a lower rate to pay off the higher interest. So that was all initiated and done by the village. They just kind of inform us that that's what they're doing, because as they have to levy our taxes, they also have to take debt out for us. So the village is very helpful in that regard, and that will be helpful in the future.
Yeah.
So that's based on the village's debt rating, like?
Yes,
Correct.
yeah. And they do, because our debt, sometimes they'll take out debt and some of it's one debt issuance, they'll have both of us in it. And so they'll refinance it too,
Yeah, and
to help everyone.
yeah, municipalities are generally very conscious of the interest rate environment and when it's up.
So
And of course, their bond companies and things like that
Yeah.
are quick to tell them when it's a good time to refinance. So
Great job with the fiscal discipline to you
Yeah.
folks staying below the budget.
It's a group effort. Any questions? Well, Ed, thanks so much for being
Thank you.
here.
So
thanks a lot. And thank you to Anna, Kate, and everyone for all their assistance and make the job much easier. So we certainly appreciate that.
Ed? You're free to go. You don't have to stay. Want to make sure. Okay, Linda, you're.
Oh, well, we actually do need a motion to
Oh,
accept the audit as
I know.
presented. It's
Do we
okay.
need to get in that?
No, I think we can accept the audit
Okay.
without Ed in the room.
Okay. Can I have a motion to accept the fiscal year 25 draft audit as presented?
So moved.
Thank you. Can I get a second? Thanks, Grace. And we need a roll call vote.
Mr. Baser?
Yes.
Ms. Boudin?
Yes.
Ms. Grisham?
Yes.
Ms. Oliver?
Yes.
Mr. Patel?
Yes.
Ms. Spector Bishop?
Yes.
Ms. Unical? Yes.
Now we will move on to the website project, please. Featuring our own. Sorry.
Oh, we know that you're just cooling your name. Hello, and thank you for inviting me to talk about our website redesign tonight. For those of you who don't know me, I am Linda Veering. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager. I've been at the library for about 7 years. Our library website has been around for about 10 years. So when I started, it was actually still kind of new and in its infancy. It's a little long in the tooth now. So we're embarking on this plan to redesign our site so that it can really accurately reflect how wonderful the library is and how beautiful and how amazing that everyone who walks in here knows, but we don't necessarily feel like if they look at our website that that is strongly coming through. And as we know, some people will experience the library from looking at our website. They might not even, sad to say, but they might not walk in the building. They might just be interacting digitally. So we really want to make sure that it's as inviting and as inclusive as our library is itself. So if you're wondering what this project would entail, a full website design includes, but isn't limited to, architecture, copy, graphics, and in our case, most likely a new underlying platform. The platform that it was built on 10 years ago was Drupal. A lot of libraries use Drupal. It's a CMS, content management system platform, sort of like WordPress. And it served us pretty well. We've made some minor and major upgrades. But one thing that I've noticed since I've been kind of overseeing the site is even tiny little changes that we either want to make because we want things to work differently or that we're forced to make through security updates or functionality updates really seem to break a lot of things. And it's really concerning because you can't test every single link and every single functionality on a site. And we get surprised. We were just surprised the other day when we noticed some links that used to work, all of a sudden now are not working. It happens. It happens. Forms went missing. Functionality that used to work just seems to really take a hit anytime we have to do these security updates, and they're necessary to do. So we feel that that platform has caused a lot of frustration. I know it has with me personally, with other staff that work in the website. I think it's safe to say that no one will be extremely sad if we decide to go with a different platform. So we're ready for a comprehensive redesign. And today I'm going to walk you through our plan for the new website that prioritizes accessibility, usability, and intuitive design. And as one community survey respondent said, the website is clunky and counterintuitive. And I feel like we might all agree that it works. People are able to use it, but it is a little clunky and the design isn't always the most intuitive for today's library user and what they're looking for. So our existing website faces some limitations that impact our ability to serve our community in a way that we find to be effectively. So one is that the site layout and design prevents a challenge to people finding the information they need quickly with 1 or 2 clicks. We rely a lot on people trying to understand the way that the navigation works rather than knowing that the way that people want to interact is most popular things should be very up in front and easy to find and easy to get to. And our site currently is very limited in terms of moving things around and changing navigation. The backend admin tools, or the tools that I use when I'm maintaining the site, are cumbersome and they limit my ability to make updates and improvements. It's always going back to our consulting firm and then waiting and then testing and then implementing and then finding issues. So it's makes you just kind of not want to make any changes. Our current platform, has limited integration capabilities with our front-end interfaces like our event registration, our room booking, checkout, and account management systems, which can be challenging for patrons and staff to navigate because it really feels like a very big disconnect when you're hitting one area versus another. We want it to be more seamless and more
an experience where people don't feel like they're hitting these different systems, even though they still will be. Lastly, we want to find a solution that can help maintain the security and integrity of the site. I mentioned this before, where even a minor upgrade has caused major problems with functionality on the site. So our vision for the future, we want to develop a modern, accessible website that serves as a community resource and meets or exceeds the current web accessibility standards. Specifically, we're looking at Web Content Accessibility Guidelines 2.1 at the AA level or higher. These standards keep changing, and that is something that is really important for many different reasons that we meet. One is we want our website to be accessible for everyone so that it accommodates someone if they're visually impaired, in any sort of, interaction with their website. Another is that websites that that don't meet these guidelines are also subject to lawsuits. So that is less of a reason, because I don't think we would ever be in that situation, but we worked really hard with our current web team to make sure that they do meet these levels. We also want our new website to feature navigation that allows users to quickly find the resources and services that they're looking for, regardless of their technical expertise or abilities. We don't want to force them to think the way that we're thinking. We want to try to think that the way that they would access these areas of the sites. We also want multi-language support so that we can ensure that our non-English speaking community members can access information in their preferred language to make our website a little more inclusive than it is currently. And then from an operational standpoint, we want to make sure that it integrates with our existing platforms and databases. We do have a lot of different connectors, APIs, systems talking to each other. So we want to make sure that we streamline that process. We also want, and this I'm speaking for myself, I want the administrative interface to be user-friendly, and I want to be able to move things around and shift things and change things so that we're not always limited to these strict systems that we have in place. And we want it to be built with a responsive design, because we know that many people are interacting with our websites on a tablet, on a phone, or even on their, possibly on their watch. So we want to make sure that the site that we build has a responsive system framework so that no matter how you look at it, it looks good and you can find what you need to. Not everybody has a gigantic monitor or two. So as I was told, we want our new website to be, to guide this project effectively. We've established a web development group consisting of staff members with relevant experience or interest in website redesign. And this group is going to serve as our internal advisory board. They're also going to be the interface to their departments, and they're going to provide ongoing input in helping to test the solutions as we progress, because this is a huge undertaking and we need all the help we can get. So we have a member from Adult Services, Maker Services, Youth Services, and IT currently, and Kate will be an ad hoc member as well. And so the first step to begin researching, the first step is to begin researching other websites and web platforms, which I've been doing for a few months now, talking to other marketing groups that have gone through this process, looking and seeing what's available, trying to figure out what would work for us, put together a list, and then we'll continue by reaching out to the staff and patrons to better understand their pain points with the current website and gather wish list items for the new platform. And then we'll use this feedback to shape our priorities and ensure that we're addressing user needs rather than making assumptions about what people want. And then after that, based on the findings, we'll create a requirements document that outlines essential features, functionality, and design elements. And that's going to serve as our roadmap, and it'll be important when we move to the next phase, which is identifying and partnering with a web development professional who can build our site. So, of course, during all of this, we'll be working with IT to ensure smooth integration with existing systems and infrastructure, and getting information and feedback from other departments, and basically from all staff as well through the process. So another element is, once we're past the fun stuff and getting the site rolled out and everything, is just ensuring that the site will remain effective for years to come. So we want to future-proof as much as we can. That means that when we select a technology, we want to make sure it's scalable and that we maintain the documentation so that we can train for the future. And it also would mean
establishing a maintenance plan that includes regular updates and security patches. So where we are in terms of the plan, we're currently in the research web developers phase. We're planning to finalize selections and present back to you, the board, in November. The hope is that we would have a selected developer to present to you in April. And we hope to begin web development of the new site. This will not disrupt our current site, so they can both operate independently in May. And our hope is that the new site will go live in December of 2026. So now that you've heard all of this, are there any questions?
Linda, it feels like it's so long of a process. My first reaction is, I'd like something to react to. Rather, I mean, visually and auditorily and the whole thing, rather than how much input can you get until it becomes just words, rather than a picture, rather than something that you're gonna evoke a response. There's only so many ideas that you can input, and then even I'd like to see short examples, something to react to rather than listen to. Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah, it's really hard to imagine what it would be like. So that's why right now I'm going through the process of taking a lot of screen captures and pointing out things, you know, here's something that seems to work really well. At the point that we start to have formal conversations with some of the development providers, will obviously be looking at live sites that they've created for other libraries. The nice thing is there's so many libraries, there's so many sites. I don't know that there's a site that you can point to that says this is perfect and everything is absolutely
And
right.
there never will be.
And there never will be. And they're also different depending on their community and what they find to be the most important. But I think it is really helpful to be able to look at a website that's been developed by someone that you're talking to and understand the process.
And you don't have to reinvent the wheel.
Exactly.
You know, people are doing good things. There was a piece on the news this afternoon, the Library of Things in New Brunswick, Maine. It was, you know, there was a whole piece on it and I went, oh, we have that too. And so I think it's, you know, those kinds of things that are, what are they doing to talk about that? And so I don't think it has to be purely original. It's finding the best and making it ours.
Exactly. Yeah, agreed.
Just for clarification, I'm looking at the timeline, and I think maybe you meant 8/1/25 and 11/20/25.
Oh, did I?
For the first
time?
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
But actually,
did, Janet.
my actual question was, so between November and April, what is happening there? It says in November, finalize selections and present to the board for input. I assume you mean selections of web developers.
Yes.
That's what I thought. And then what is that developer doing? Since they're not beginning web development till May, what are they doing? What are they presenting in April, and what's going on between November and April?
So after the web developer presents to the board, we will still be working with them to go through some of the processes. There's also, having spoken to a few, we're also kind of at the, we have to fit into their timeline as well. So some of these dates are just, they're not set in stone. They're kind of like, there's padding in there for different situations.
I assumed that I've done web.
Yes, yeah,
myself, so I
it's
know.
like a
It just, the
35,
November
40.
to April seemed very large. and
Yes.
I wondered what was going on in that.
Yeah, I will be, I'll try to put together a more specific, I do have like a more specific timeline. I was just pulling out certain dates. So, but I can be more specific in that.
Linda is being very diplomatic. The other thing is that we know that the board might have lots of thoughts on this. And so when we're bringing options to you, we recognize that it might take a few meetings in order for the board to be like, yes, this is the one that we're going to say yes and approve. So I told Linda to build in more time, assuming that that was going to be something that might happen. If that doesn't happen, then we can move.
Yeah, I would love nothing more than to like see this timeline compressed, but we'll see what happens because I've also worked with web developers for many years and things seem to just come up and get in the way. And so
And we don't want anyone to feel rushed. This is a really big deal. Our digital footprint is critically important. I mean, we had over 300,000 visitors last year. We have easily double that visit the website every year. And I had to pull that number, but like, we know that this is critically important. So we don't want to just be like, oh, it's good enough. And want you to feel confident in the decision that we're making.
But also timely. It just feels, it's long overdue. And I think that we're not such a difficult group of people to please. We pretty much are in sync with things that are quality. And so I digress from, or I disagree with you in that, so we should allow a lot of time for the board. I think it's really more important to get this done. And if you're making it as adaptable as possible, hopefully it's not written in stone and things can be changed. If there's, not that you don't want to go in as ideal as possible, but it'll never be perfect anyway.
I
So
think there's a balance there too of getting it done, but also I sometimes think, and I deal with a university website and I'm not going to steamroll Linda here. I also think sometimes people forget how many pages exist within our website. And it's not just the landing page and the splash pages and the reserve a book. There are literally hundreds of pages. And it's all got to launch at once and it all needs to meet these accessibility standards. And I think about the time already put into our website, like, and meeting those accessibility standards. Every image has alt text. You don't see that on a lot of pages, and every link is accessible, and we're using accessible language. So we have a really good foundation, but this isn't just like take these words and put them into a template. There is so much work that still has to be done because there are things on, and we also use Drupal. So you and I should talk Drupal. But like our navigation shouldn't fall down over the hero image. That's not how that's supposed to work, but that's how Drupal works. So like, I'm sure Linda could sit and make a wish list of a million things. And so I want to be sensitive to, yes, this needs to be timely. And also there's a lot of content that needs to be updated and moved. I did actually have a question too, though. Linda, where does the app fit into all this? Would you consider that part of this? Are you hoping to find like a joint product?
App is interesting because it's built on, it's Communico, so it's not, okay, so you have our desktop version of the site if you're.
Can we I just want to mention for Communico for Bryce and Adam, because you might not, and everyone might not remember. Communico does all of our programs, room bookings and study room bookings. So it also is the app. So that is the platform. It also does the digital displays out in the lobby. So that is the Communico platform.
It doesn't do the beautiful design on the display, but it has the slide management. So some people get confused. They look at our mobile site. So if you're looking at our phone on our full website, you'll see it looks a little different. It doesn't, it's visible and you can get everywhere, but it does look a little different. And then we have the app, which is completely separate. You have to install that, go to the App Store or Google Play and install that. And it just has just a very small subset of what you would find on our full app. But you can get to the things that people are highly interested in getting to. So they can get to Libby and they can get to our events scheduling and room reservations, which is very popular. So the app will not change. We're going to continue to use Communico. The app will look the same, although can I say that it will be changing a little because it's going to be updating soon and it's going to get a lot better. So that process is also happening.
Testing that right now.
Yeah, we're beta testing that right now, which is.
Anyone is using the app a lot and wants to be a beta tester.
Yeah, I'll volunteer for that.
Okay, okay.
And some people think that the app is our website, because we've gotten feedback about like, it didn't say this on your website. And then I realize it, you know, after thinking, well, if it does say that right at the top, I'm like, oh, they're using the app, but they don't distinguish, which is completely understandable that you, if that's how you interact with the library, that's what you think the website is. So, so the app will stay the same, but the site and then the mobile version of the site will be different.
Will sort of the clunkiness of the app be resolved by the updates of to the
So,
website?
like
Being like
what
the room
her-
booking, how it kicks you?
Yes, the room booking is so much better. You'll be very happy. You just get a whole list of times and it shows you what's available and what's not. You can just click on it and pick a time.
So even though the app isn't necessarily updating in connection with this website project, some of the functionality on the back end will feel smoother.
Right.
It's gonna feel smoother
Understood.
in like a month.
Okay.
Yeah, they're not connected at all to the website, but people will be happier. And I think a lot of people do use the app. I mean, we have statistics on how many people, and it is gonna be better. So that's a good thing. So that'll be like a little like mini jump to the website, even though it's not a connected product.
And in thinking about some of the comments that some of the trustees made, I'm going to mention something that I told Linda we weren't gonna mention today, but I'm gonna mention it because I think that it is applicable. So the CCS governing board, which is our library consortium with all of the libraries in it, that share resources, just voted to have a new overlay on our catalog. We're going to BiblioCommons. BiblioCommons has a website product. And this is something that, because we just voted this last week at governing board, is a brand new thing. So Linda has already been talking to them. Glenview uses this and has been using it for the last 3 years now. So that it is a lot more integrated. So that is something that the overlay is going to take a little while. We don't have a timeline yet from CCS on when that's going to happen, but that is something that we will be looking very seriously at, because they do everything and it would seamlessly integrate. So people often say like, oh, it's the website, when it's the catalog. And in this instance, it would all look the same and it would be so, all of one thing. So we're kind of doing a pretty deep dive into this to see if this can be the solution, which would mean that we could go a lot quicker. And it would be from a long-term support perspective, from everything we've heard from Glenview, and they're the only ones that we've, talked with yet. They handle everything. Anything you need, you just call them. They're there 24/7. And so this is something that, Linda and I were just talking about this afternoon, is an option that would help us, I think, move a lot more quickly. But we're waiting. We don't have pricing yet. So there's still a lot of unknowns, but that is something that may be a thing that would help us move more quickly. Yeah. And be a really great polished product.
Kind of leads into my next question. Do you have a sense of the ballpark of cost?
No, that's one thing that we've just been kind of putting down our wish list and looking at examples. We haven't looked at cost. I mean, I have spoken about cost with certain websites, but developers usually base it on so many different things. It could be your number of pages on your site. It can be the size of your community, it can be your budget size. So we don't have any cost figures, but that'll be something when we narrow it down to, some of the developers that we take into that next phase, that would be something that we would investigate.
One thought on that, just because I handle a lot of software development litigation. If it's possible to get bids in a fixed fee, maybe in addition to time and materials, but the time and materials with software developers, I'm sure you probably know, can like spin out of control. So just something to consider as we're gathering bids.
And we do have money that we have set aside in the budget based on averages that we've gotten from other units of local government and other libraries. So we have $40,000 set aside for the development of the new site. But we also know that one of the things that we will need is either the company that we go with, can they do ongoing support, or will we need to have something, or will we need to bring someone in-house. Right now, we've been working with a vendor who anytime we need to do any actual web development, they do that. But we would love to find something that is an all-in-one solution that can help us long-term, but then that cost then is something we'll also be factoring in. Agree.
I was curious, you have that in-house IT computer group?
It
are
is
they-
not in-house, it is outsourced with
Outsourced.
Outsourced Solutions Group.
Outsourced solutions.
That doesn't do websites.
They don't do websites, but do you have in-house expertise? Because you're modernizing your website. You mentioned integration to systems and APIs and stuff like that. I don't know, hackers and malicious content. Like, is there someone here at the library that, as you modernize, is able to say, yep, we're going to be covered migrating over to this new web platform, to be able to say that?
OSG would be still
Okay.
doing that. So they do a ton of testing, cybersecurity, reviews of our site, of our environments, and but that is a big piece that Linda's looking at as well. So IT is on, as Linda mentioned, on the website committee. So we have someone from OSG that's
Okay.
serving on it.
Great.
And they would absolutely be, we don't really have anyone in-house that is a
Okay.
cybersecurity expert.
Yep, I was just hoping that they would be involved. as the
100%.
Experts.
Yeah, because we know that this is, especially because we know a lot of hackers are targeting units of local government.
Yeah.
So, very
Cool.
aware. We just had our quarterly phishing test. Fun times.
Linda, thank you. That was a lot of information. And we appreciate.
All right, thank you very much. Have a good night. Yeah.
Moving on to item 8.3, the room rental policy update.
Okay, so I was gonna start by just kind of reminding everyone what we have done. It was in my memo, but I thought it would be helpful to just kind of share that the board a few months ago we decided to move forward with creating a working group that was comprised of trustees, Janet and Maura, community members, as well as staff. So we had two board members, 3 staff members, and 6 community members. We met twice in July and August. It was facilitated by Biz Lindsay Ryan, and talked a lot about both philosophically and in detail, things that we wanted to see in the policy. Julie and I were at both of the meetings. We were more observers and note takers, not active participants, unless questions came up, which they did. And so the goal of the working group that the board had defined was an opportunity to give feedback and guidance, identify pain points or things that needed repair or consideration, identify things that aren't clear, and identify barriers to access. And then we also defined what it was not, which was a forum to litigate specific issues, which didn't end up being an issue at all. A way to advocate for one group's specific perspective, a way to micromanage Northbrook staff, or a chance to go beyond the scope of this work to dictate the library's values or get involved in implementation. That being said, we did get a lot of feedback about things that would be helpful in implementation, which we have taken down and will absolutely be using when the policies are adopted, so that we do have that thought and that feedback that we can use to improve the process for people when they're registering for meeting rooms, whether it's on the app or on the website. There were a number of key themes that came up. Of course, as you can imagine, the topic of free speech and public access came up. And I thought one of the participants said really beautifully, anything we do will be challenging, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't try to do it thoughtfully. And I think this group really came together. There was a diversity of opinions and thoughts, and everyone really engaged respectfully and productively in thinking through what would best serve the community at large. No one came with ideas of like, well, I just want this because it would be better for me. Everyone came and focused around that. And there was really, I think, at the end, a unity of what people wanted. There also was a theme of clarity around the roles, enforcement, and how we message things. So we looked, when Julie and I reviewed all of the feedback and looked at the policy, we really looked at how we were wording things. And I really appreciate everyone that was in the working group took such time and attention in looking at and flagging things that they thought could be improved upon. We did look at a number of peer policies, as Nancy pointed out earlier, and looked to see what things would be a good addition. We added some things. There were other things that we felt were positive. So Julie and I took all of this feedback, which was so helpful. We updated, we shared it with the working group. The working group had another opportunity to give additional feedback, which we then updated again and shared it. We did have, as you heard from Marla and Nancy, some additional things come up. We did get a lot of additional feedback about the public code of behavior. I 100% agree with Marla. This is a policy that we absolutely need to update and want to do that. That was not something that I thought we had enough time to do thoughtfully in order to bring to the board at this meeting, but it is absolutely something that we do need to do and is, I agree, tied into the meeting room policy. I brought the meeting room policy to the board. I do feel that it is ready for adoption, but of course it is entirely up to the board, and would like to have a discussion about the public code of behavior and what type of involvement the board would have. Do we want to go back to how we did things traditionally? Do we want to do something different? This is something that I think it's really important to not just have the few staff that were on it, but for have the public code of behavior touches just about every area of library operations. We use it extensively in training and in our security stuff. And so I really want to make sure that we have a lot of feedback from the staff that are using it every day. And would hope that we could do that. Again, I don't want that to be like a year-long process, but I do want to take a little bit more time for that. I want to also, and I promise I'm almost done talking. I want to just thank everyone. This was a process that people could have come with really, access to grind or wanting to, disrupt things, and everyone came with the intent of how can we make things better for people to more easily and effectively use the library, which I so appreciated. All of our working group members, our board members, our staff members putting in all of this time. And it was, I think, really helpful to have all of the voices that we had at the table and be able to hear them and use all of the feedback to make the policy strong. And so I'm happy to answer any questions. I wasn't going to go through every change because you guys saw the marked up version and the clean versions, but I'm happy to answer any questions. We also have our wonderful and brilliant attorney, Julie Tappendorf, who can answer anything on the legal front. So I'm going to stop talking and see what questions people have and what I can answer, or Julie can answer.
I wanted to ask is I also agree that working on the public code of behavior is very, very important. It is such a big umbrella, far broader than the meeting room policy, that I think it behooves us to take our time on that. However, I was curious as to what you thought in terms of how much time.
So I'm awful at estimating time. And I was saying to Kelly, I'm like, I think that we could absolutely talk with everyone on staff, get feedback from the board, and get something by November. And she looked at me and she's like, really? Like that? It's very helpful. And so in my heart, I want it to be November. That feels reasonable. And then she's like, well, but think about some of the other projects we have. I'm like, okay, that's fair. The board doesn't meet in December. And so that January feels like a long time away. So I would love to have something in November. I also want to make sure that we are doing this thoughtfully. It is, I think, something that is going to require multiple conversations. The language that is used, there was a lot of great discussion in the working groups. This language that we have in the public code of behavior, I think, is really critically important. I would want to also engage with some of our EDI consultants in thinking about the language and how we're using it and how it's showing up, but also thinking about it from the perspective of how are we operationalizing this? If we're putting this in, how are we going to actually use it? How are we going to enforce this policy? How is it going to look day to day? So short answer, November to January? Question mark?
I mean, yeah,
Unless you guys want to meet in December?
I think it would be, not to change the subject, but I think it would be helpful for, before we beat on it for the staff and for Julie to have taken like a first, second, or third pass at it first before we do it, because I think it's, those are really kind of gonna be the critical ones there.
Agreed.
I think that would be, I think.
So maybe it's a discussion with staff, a discussion with the board to then inform with Julie and I. Updating.
Yeah, I mean, I think that Julie's input on it probably.
And she has
before we-
already.
Right,
Yeah,
before
but
we
yeah.
even look at it.
Yeah. Okay.
Your point about how is it going to look? And it's like saying to a child, you know, don't do this or else. What does or else look
Yeah,
like? And,
right.
and who's going to implement it and who's going to define it? And I think that that's where the staff would be really helpful.
Yep.
So that we understand how this will be implemented. It's nice to say it, but then.
Sure. It's easy to say.
Exactly.
Or else, and then it's like, is or else you're grounded for a month or no dessert for a day? Like, what does that actually mean? And how are you gonna actually make them do, like?
So it's almost a procedure to follow
Yeah,
and I think it has to be doable, practical. It's nice to be able to say, and I also didn't see anything about security.
in the meeting room policy, that is correct. So one of the things that was discussed was the language we had in there about the security fees, while having it in the policy 100% legal. How we implement it, as we talked about with the board and in the working group, it does raise issues. I'm gonna actually turn to Julie to see, because you speak so much more eloquently on this, to kind of do a quick, why we took it out because of how it would have to be implemented.
Right, so it wasn't having a security fee on its own by itself being in the policy is not illegal. The problem comes in when you apply the security fee. So right now it was discretionary. And when will we use it? We would use it when there's controversial speech. And that's the First Amendment issue, which is exactly what the ACLU pointed out. And I think they even admitted that fees on their own are not illegal. But if you're using the fee and imposing the fee because of speech, because of the content of the message or how people will react or the impact of that speech, that's treating people differently. That's viewpoint discrimination. And that's why we talked about options of taking discretion away, because the only time we're imposing it is when we're going to get in trouble, First Amendment wise. So either don't impose it at all or impose it on every meeting, because then it's neutral. And the discussion was, do we need a security fee? Do we need to impose a security fee for every single use of every single meeting? And the discussion, I think it was pretty clear that nobody wanted to do that. So that's why it's gone.
And we are going to be, I've already spoken with Kelly, beefing up our emergency operation procedures to better lay out how we will determine when additional security is needed for anything, whether it be a room booking or a library event. Right now, we have a lot of discussions around it, but we don't necessarily have it as fleshed out in procedure. So that's something that from this, we definitely want to flesh out, and Kelly is going to be working with Jaffe on.
I just think there needs to be some, I don't know. In these ridiculous times that we live in, I don't know why, it doesn't have to be a fee as much as provisions for, I don't know, but it feels
Are
like,
you saying you want to know what would we do if we felt security was necessary and who is covering those costs?
and I don't even care about the costs. I really feel that an issue in any gatherings now, and I'm really not paranoid, is the fact that I want to feel safe. So I don't know if that means we are responsible for locked doors or having a person, I don't know. But I think that it was glaring to me that there was no mention of security.
And Barbara, I hear what you're saying, but I think that's separate. I think that goes back to the safety and security plan from Jaffe, because that should be internal information that we don't publicly share of this is what security looks like when we need to make those decisions, similar to how Julie, Kelly, Kate, and I know a lot of things about last year that will never probably be shared and Anna to some extent, sorry, I didn't mean to give you FOMO. I could tell you were left out. Like there are just things that we couldn't share more broadly and decisions that were made. But the more people that knew, the more likely it was that it was going to compromise the safety of the event. So I think that anything we put in the policy needs to be forward facing. We need to assume it will be on the website. It's public, people will access it, and really needs to address the behavior and responsibility of people who are borrowing the room. And our responsibilities live in internal documentation and safety and security plans and agreements that we have with Jaffe.
And the
Does that
fact
seem
that
fair, Kelly?
we can't ensure that it's not gonna be an incident or whatever it is, so.
Right, we are a public building that anyone can walk inside.
So just to clarify, we have discretion to apply a security fee?
No,
We took
that out.
we have
took that-
discretion to have security, but
Correct.
not for a fee, is that correct?
And that is very clear. So
Okay.
our decision, the library's decision on safety and security, whether that is to protect staff or attendees or members of the public, board members, whatever it is the library's decision.
Okay.
And that, if it's internal, not in the meeting room plan, we're not putting it out publicly, but that's an internal operational issue, and that's entirely within the library's discretion. Some people may not like, oh, well, we don't want this. I mean, some people complain, some libraries have security guards all the time. Some use them only as necessary. Those are decisions made by the library, and that's fine. That's not a constitutional issue. And I would recommend not addressing security in here and addressing it more internally.
Okay.
It's operations.
So then the burden of the costs associated would fall on the library?
Correct.
So then if I could take, because the topics come up a little bit about insurance and indemnity. Going into this, for me, back to the unforeseen and the modernization, to me, going into this, it gave me a sense of comfort that we don't want, like, we want to have the open community opportunity to have the meetings, but there's a lot of unforeseen. So that would be the reason for me to think insurance and indemnity can still apply.
And the insurance, just to be clear, is only for the auditorium.
Yeah.
It's for day of. We give people recommendations on day of insurance, which
Day of event liability insurance is what we require for auditorium rentals, and we have several sites that people can go to and purchase that we have vetted.
and checked with our insurance.
Yeah.
Broker on
The Northbrook Park District Theater, they rent their space out. I would assume they do the same thing and they require outside organizations to
do.
have
They-
insurance. Okay.
They really minimally rent out that space as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
To do
Yeah.
it for some.
Yeah.
I'll just add, I work for a public school district. We also rent out our spaces and we do require insurance.
Yeah. For those.
It's pretty common, in my experience with use of government buildings by private parties, third parties. Indemnification, we always would put that if it's a room rental, meeting room as small as that, or even a very large, facility use where it's a rental. They're government buildings, they're taxpayer, and we have an obligation to protect the taxpayer. The room users are responsible for their use, and so requiring them to indemnify, very common. And not every single library, but most of them do, and park districts and municipalities, that's very common. The insurance is limited, and the reason for it, it's not every single room, oh, I'm gonna have a quilting bee or, or a book club, but I'm gonna use the auditorium, and there's a lot of potential cost to the library if there's damage. And so, yes, they're responsible for damage, everybody is, but it takes it to the next level to say that could be a very costly issue. And so we want to make sure that insurance. So I think that was the intention behind not requiring insurance for every single room, because that's a cost. But requiring it for the room where there could be the greatest potential expense or risk, I should say, to the library. And then indemnification would apply to everyone. It puts the onus on the people using the room to indemnify if there is something that happens.
Thank you.
And just to clarify about the security, when you mentioned security fees, Julie, you meant that would go into like the safety and security plan, which is like an internal facing plan. Okay. I guess I'm happy to comment. So, I really appreciate everyone working so hard on this, really. I mean, spending the extra hour, especially like the board members and the members of the public. And I think this is really important and timely to work. And by the amount of redlining here, clearly very necessary. I view this as more comprehensive, maybe than just the meeting policy, meaning I would like to see the updates to the code of behavior, because I get that they're not dependent on each other. I certainly appreciate that. I think that the purpose of revisiting this is a whole look at how we're gonna look at events that take place at the library. What's the behavior expected of the people who attend those events? And I would propose, I'm interested, I would prefer to wait to vote on this red line until we see the proposed updates to the code of behavior. That said, I am conscious of the timeline that Janet pointed out on that code of behavior, and just think that we should look at a more comprehensive way.
To kind of respond to that point, what would be the impact to the current process if that more comprehensive approach was imposed? Is there any impact, I guess is what my question.
Any changes would be paused until the formal policy was adopted. After the formal policy is adopted, I and Tracy Gossage, who is oversees the staff that approve the room rentals, would be then going through all of our procedural documentation and rolling this out, which I would estimate would take probably 1 to 2 months, just because there are, like I said, we did get a lot of great feedback that we want to incorporate into like the how we're doing it to make it a little bit easier for people. So that then would be whenever the policy is adopted would be then when we would start that work, because we can't really start the work until we know what the policy says. So that would be the only thing. So any changes for patrons would just take a little longer.
I think given when I was being interviewed for the board, that question about what did we learn from what happened in the fall was the fact that we have lessons, we have things that we need to improve and we need to learn. And I think this is too important to not make it as comprehensive as possible. Yeah, again, it's not written in stone, but there are a lot of people watching to see how this gets implemented and how we address it. And I mean, there's some language in there that I would have liked to have cleaned up, but I also think it's too important to not include that whole. Mhm.
My concern is that because I think the public code of behavior is a larger, broader discussion, and if it took us 3-4 months to get through the room rental policy, it seems like it's gonna take us 3 to 4 months to get through the room rental or the public code of behavior. And if I just don't want to leave ourselves vulnerable for a situation where someone comes in to rent a room and we've got a repeat of what happened last time or something similar, and we don't have a room rental policy that we feel secure and comfortable with. And so I feel like I don't think anything in the room rent, the code, or I'm sorry, let me restart. I don't think there's anything, there are changes we'll make to the public behavior code. I keep mumbling that, but I don't think it's gonna necessarily go back and change the room rental policy. It's
No,
gonna be.
it wouldn't, and
It
here's
wouldn't.
why, because the meeting room policy incorporates it, but only by reference.
Yeah.
So it's not as if it's rewritten into the meeting room policy, and if you change the code of behavior, you gotta come back. It would just, I mean, adopting the meeting room policy and then changing the code of behavior does not mean you have to come back. It would just be incorporated.
Right.
Because it incorporates whatever
Right.
current version of the code of behavior is.
And I also want to clarify, and certainly this can be a discussion point, but it would be my very strong preference that we not have a working group to evaluate the public code of behavior. The scope of that project was the room rental policy. And I think the work they did is phenomenal. I think this new policy really ties up some things. It cleans up the policy. I'm very happy with the outcome here. I think addressing the public code behavior, this is me on the phone the other night with Brace. I had like 80 different iterations of what that was called. I even have it open. Addressing the public code of behavior can't just go back to the room rental policy, A, because it's beyond the scope of what we asked them to do, but B, it's not representative of the community of Northbrook and who's impacted by the public code of behavior. We would need teenagers represented. We would need other people represented who maybe didn't have a vested interest in the room rental policy, and so they didn't raise their hand to say, I want to do this. But everyone who engages in the library passively or actively is impacted. And so that becomes a much larger conversation. I would like to see this return to the way we do more typical policy updates where Kate and Julie work on it and bring it to the board. And I don't know if that impacts the timeline. But I hear more as concern, like I don't want this to stretch out forever. And I don't think it needs to, because it should be in a perfect world a little bit faster. I have no idea what's up with your points, but.
No, I mean, nothing, just policy.
That's why I asked the question is, I too feel that, as Maura noted, I would like to have this in place, so that we're ready. But I really don't want that gap between passing a room booking policy and the public code of behavior to be very big, which is why I was asking.
So
That would be.
one of the biggest things that are making me think about the timeline is that this fall, Anna and I are slated to start working on updating the master plan stuff. That's a massive project. That is also a really important project. That will take a lot of time. If we could push that a little bit, if the board would be comfortable waiting on that for a few months. I know, I don't know how to make more hours in the day. If I did, I would. How do we, I'm happy to reprioritize to get this, to make sure that this is done. We have the security camera RFP. We are still onboarding Jason, and Anna's doing a fantastic job with that. We have our benefits review that Becky is working on. And we, this policy I agree. It's really important. The public code of behavior is really important. Prioritizing that, I do think like we can do it at the managers meetings, but I do think it requires input from staff in all of the public service departments who are using it every day. And that just takes a little bit of time. I think we could absolutely get it done by November if it is okay to pause some of this other stuff, not the benefits review, because we have a super detailed timeline on that, and that depends on the insurance company.
Yeah.
And not the security, but like, so like I am happy to.
Currently, there is a public code of behavior.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean,
It
so
is-
it's not,
It's not like it doesn't exist. It is more redefining some of the terminology in it to, as Marla pointed out, really clarify. And that was something that very much came up and has come up with staff. And that's something that I think people are gonna have lots of feelings around and on staff, and we're gonna need to have some pretty in-depth discussions. And then there's, of course, the legal aspects of how are we doing this, and then the operational and safety aspects. So we want to do it right. We also don't want it to take forever. And I also am trying to be cognizant of the other things we have. So knowing all of that, I'm more than happy to go in whatever direction the board would like with this.
well, in prioritizing, for sure, this policy needs to be out there sooner rather than later. I think that until it was mentioned by Marla about the public code, I didn't realize that there was a gap in where we needed to review it. But I think that for me, that's not on the high priority. I think that
What isn't on the high priority, the
I
room
think
rental or the?
I think the room rental policy is very important. I think let's get that done and in place, and because it's gonna keep coming up in terms of practicality. And I also think the whole environmental, whatever,
Oh, the master plan.
right, I think that's way up there as well. I would put that before the code of public behavior. So that's my priority list. And I'm so proud of you for saying I can't do both.
I mean, you guys told me I'm supposed
That
to
is
do
a
that,
big
so.
step. That's good.
When I think about the public code of behavior, I think about the work environment for our staff, and that is important to me. And I that's another reason, even if we didn't have this room rental thing in front of us, that I would be wanting to expedite that or, get to that as soon as made sense. I want to make sure our staff are comfortable and feel safe and have the tools they need to make sure this is a safe environment. It's a tough one though, because I also really would like to work on the facilities. We've been pushing that off so much.
I know.
Can I say something? Being the person who would be helping with the master plan, as Jason pointed out in his report, he really needs to get through a winter season to understand how all of the equipment is working. He also pointed out that Apogee system is old and needs to get replaced. So it's, in my mind, it's important to give them through the winter. Then we need to do the building automation system upgrade. And then we need to think about the master plan. And I am not saying that the master plan is not important, because I think it is. But I think to be able to give us the time and the energy and the space to do it correctly, that should be the time frame, or how we are looking at these projects. Because keep in mind, in that, we're going to be doing a security camera upgrade. And so those are all building projects that Jason needs to be a part of, and I need to be a part of. And to be running 3 projects simultaneously, it's just not feasible. So, that's my vote.
To go back, we're talking about staff, bandwidth. is there a history of implementing multiple updated policies simultaneously? If we're talking about policies at the level of the room rental and the code of yeah. I was just gonna
Sorry,
call it
we'll
behavior
clearly
thing.
should find a
It's-
different name for
yeah,
that one.
Horribly named.
Sorry,
thing.
it's a legacy
Yeah,
name and we
right.
will work on that.
But is there a history of like rolling out
Yeah.
those simultaneously? Or in the past, has there been, what's the history of
Both.
policy implementation?
So what we have done in the past is we have, and we're actually due for doing like a complete review of the entire policy manual, which I was planning for after we review the employee handbook. Is if we're doing a big one, because I think it's important, there's sometimes things that come up that there's a law that changes or we gain some new knowledge, and so we do a one-off. Those, I would say we do maybe 3 or 4 times a year when things bubble up. Every 5 years or so, we try and do an overarching one because it's important to see not just each policy individually, but how they all interconnect. And so for those, that is a much bigger undertaking. We do a lot more communication with staff, like with the unattended children and vulnerable adults policy that the board approved in the consent agenda tonight. That's something that we'll talk about at the all staff meeting. It will go in the next all staff email. We'll update the internal documents, and that's kind of it. It's not a huge change. With the other ones, when there are major changes, there's a lot of discussion of like, here are the changes, here is what's coming, here's when it's implemented. Let's talk through how this is going to look and operationalize and changing all the procedures. That typically takes anywhere from like, I would say 9 to 12 months to do the entire review, approving it and implementing it. Because there's, like 100+ pages of policies. So both. We do both.
Is there a way, and you can tell me no,
Anything is possible.
that's not true. Is there a way that we can do a policy update to the public code of behavior I got at that time that is timely, does not necessarily go through all of the steps we would like, but reduces our vulnerability just with you and Julie and Anna and Kelly, but like get something in front of the board in November, ideally, to tighten that up so that we can pass both of these versus waiting and having all of this just sitting out there in terms of project work. Like Maura might not live if we don't start working on a master plan, and we need to work on. No, I'm not letting you leave this board until we have a master plan.
I do not think that was obnoxious. I think that was a heartfelt thought.
We need for architecture experience and expertise.
So Julie and I have already looked at the public code of behavior. I will say we did get some, we got a lot of feedback. It didn't all agree. If it did, it would have been really easy. Absolutely, we can do an abbreviated process. I just don't know that we will have as much buy-in as we would like. And we could update the policy every month for the next 5 years if the board wanted to. I'm not suggesting that. That's a horrible idea.
Not do that.
But I'm saying we could so what I'm hearing you say, Stacy, is that what would be perhaps helpful is modify the public code of behavior so that it is better, if not in the perfect state that we would ultimately like it to be, and then continue working on it so that maybe as part of a larger policy review, so that we can get it to that optimal state that we are all seeking to have, but that it at least is giving us some positive forward momentum on it, and that we approve both of those in October. Am I understanding you correctly?
I think what I would say, the legal piece is frankly the easiest piece. And I was actually reading through, I've already marked it up, sent it. I've got a couple of other changes that from a legal perspective, it's the easier piece, because I look at it as, are we violating the Constitution by prohibiting speech or viewpoint discrimination as opposed to behavior? We can control behavior. We should not be controlling the message, the viewpoint, the opinions, beliefs, all of that. And so the harder part, I think, is what do the words mean for when staff run into a situation and So I can make it legal, but how is staff gonna apply this? And so we could bring back a policy really quickly, but if staff hasn't had a chance to look at it and say, how do I enforce this? What does this mean? And here are the examples of the 5 situations I had last week, and how do they fit in here? I think it's that piece of it is too important. That's not my lawyer hat, that's my resident hat saying, I think that we should, consider how it's going to be enforced, because I think that's really key. The folks here probably every single day run into something that falls under here.
With 1,000+ people we see every day. Although all of the Northbrook residents are always a delight. Obviously, sometimes people from other communities come in.
That sort of like procedural piece of it. As you're working on that, would that change the language of the actual policy? Depending on like
I
feedback.
think
of
it absolutely would.
implementation?
The code of behavior, not the meeting room.
Not the meeting room
Nothing that
policy.
we do
No, the
there will
meeting room
change what
policy, I
the
think.
work that the committee did.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but the public code of behavior, the language that's chosen, I think absolutely would implement. And it's something that I think we need to get Kelly's input, because it does have absolutely a lot of safety concerns with that.
Yeah.
And operational.
Yeah.
Like, how do you operationalize the words in the policy?
So I think the question then is if the board feels comfortable approving the room rental policy that was presented tonight and then waiting to see a public code of behavior. That's twice, I got it right.
Yeah, you do.
To approve at a future date, or if you want to table the room rental policy until you have a public code of behavior to look at in tandem. Does that seem like a fair question?
I think since nothing in the room rental policy is going to change, no matter what we do with the public code of behavior, I feel like we could approve that tonight. I also really, I would really like to expedite working on that public code of behavior, although I would like a time turner so that we could also do this.
Yeah.
Well, and if Anna said that the whole, whatever, I have. a problem.
Master plan.
Master plan.
It sounds like something that a villain would say.
Right,
I think that's
where-
why you're struggling with it, but it's not.
Could be put off until after the winter and things have been at least put in place so that we know what we're dealing with. But there seems to be a time frame in there where there would be an opportunity to look at the public code.
Agreed. And what I'm going to suggest is a slight with the master plan. I think what would help the board, because what we don't have now is a detailed timeline, is that Anna and I can mock up a timeline for next month so that you guys can see what that looks like. That's not starting the plan, it's laying out the plan. We could absolutely do that easily. We just wouldn't start on it, and then it would give us really concrete dates to hold ourselves to. So we're not like, well, we'll get to it, because then it would give us, so that doesn't mean we're moving it forward, but it doesn't then kick it to an undetermined date down the road.
And that would create some breathing space to maybe
Do the
do this public code of behavior,
Yeah.
which I think is
How
pretty
does
important.
that sound to
Yeah.
people?
I think that sounds good.
Kind of works, yeah.
So if,
From your perspective, is that doable?
I think it is.
I
Yes.
would also be.
Oh, go ahead, Grace.
Sorry, just I'm gonna understand the timeline, meaning that we could see it and vote on at the November meeting. I'm just trying to understand
Sorry.
timelines.
For the public code of behavior?
Yeah.
So what I heard is either A, approve the meeting room policy today. I work on the public code of behavior. We free up some time and we can bring it in November. Or B, we hold off on public code of behavior or hold off on meeting room until next month and we do an abbreviated public code of behavior and then a larger review longer. I am with Julie that I don't think that that is as good an idea. because I do think we need to get that staff buy-in. And I think by November, that's absolutely possible if we're pausing kind of and just getting a timeline for the master plan.
I personally feel like, it's September right now. I think if you feel you could bring something in November, that's a fairly short time horizon between the two.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That will change my work blocks from master plan to policy.
I would also be remiss if I did not reflect on feedback that the board has given about reducing redundancy in meetings and projects and finding opportunities to do that to liberate capacity for everyone in admin.
I just want to make sure I understand, like, I'm sure we're all aligned on what we're thinking, meaning like if like an option on the table is to choose to not pass the reading, like around room rental policy right now until we can see the more comprehensive code of behavior in November, which would be a shorter timeline, given Anna's comments about how the master plan is not really ready to be worked on immediately.
I'm gonna just, Marla, I'm really sorry. I know you want them to be together. I know, but I so appreciate, I so appreciate your feedback though with all of this. I would really appreciate it if we could approve the meeting room policy, because then we could work on the procedure, and then when in November we approve the public code of behavior, the procedures will all be done and everything would be able to be rolled out, because there isn't gonna be real procedural things we have to do. There's gonna be a lot of procedural work with the meeting room policy changes, and then we could roll those out to the community in tandem.
And as noted by Maura and Janet, if nothing is changing in the room rental policy, we can approve that tonight. We don't need to table that. So and y'all can tell me no, but is there a motion to approve the room rental policy that's been presented this evening?
Again.
And voice vote.
I mean, you can always do roll
And
call.
it's not who we are as people. Okay, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
Any abstentions? Okay, room rental policy update passes. Thank you.
Look forward to bringing the public code of behavior to you in November.
Amazing. Okay, I'm gonna recommend we take a quick recess before we get into the tax levy updates.
Just to give everyone some break.
Yes. Welcome back, everyone, and we are ready to move on to agenda item 8.4, the fiscal year 26 tax levy draft presentation. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's up to Stacy. She is.
No,
the one in
you
charge.
can.
Okay, so I put together some documents in the packet for the proposed tax levy for fiscal year 27.
Erin, could you pull up?
So the options that have been presented are to keep us moving toward our long-term goals while staying fiscally responsible. We've looked at past spending, rising costs, and what the community needs. From the growing demand for services to necessary facility updates. And as the memo showed, property values have gone up nearly 19% since 2020, but we've kept our levies conservative over this time. With all that said, inflation rose 3.1% this year and labor costs are up 3.6% in the Chicago area. The real cost of how we hire, retain staff, and keep things running. These levy options aren't about expanding, they're about maintaining the service level our community expects. And based upon all of this, I've presented 5 options, 2 with 0% levy increases, 1 with a 2.8% overall levy increase, 1 with a 3.7 overall levy increase, and 1 with a 4.6 overall levy increase.
And now I'm gonna say words.
Yeah, and now Kate's gonna talk a little bit about
some of the considerations of things that we, that I wanted to point out with the strategic plan and kind of just the state of things in terms of library costs. So I'm going to start more globally and then work my way down into some of the strategic plan stuff. So we know that we are seeing inflation running at about 2.7 to 3.0%. I don't know why I said 0. Social Security cost of living adjustments for last year were at 2.5%, and employment costs as defined by the Bureau of Labor Statistics says that they've been increasing about 3.5% annually for the last few years. We are continuing to see supply chain disruptions and delays and increase in prices. Anna is diligent about seeking out the best pricing and has been for years. So like that is helpful, but the prices in general, we are seeing increase. There are also some library-specific pricing increases that we're starting to see. Magazines, which believe it or not, are still a thing, are continuing to be, are projecting to be at a 5 to 6% increase. So even though the number of magazines we have each year is decreasing because they're just not in production anymore, they are still a source that our patrons really enjoy, but we are seeing the cost for individual magazines increase. Digital content continues to have significant increases. Hoopla, which is our alternative to Libby, offers us the opportunity. We pay per use, so every time someone checks something out on Hoopla, there is an individual cost as opposed to just like a platform fee. They are implementing cost increases on the per item, so that we expect to increase. We already spend a significant amount of money on Hoopla and expect that to continue to increase. Database, we spend about $150,000 to $200,000 a year on our database and subscription services. Those on average, we see anywhere from like a 3 to 7% increase. We expect that to stay pretty stable. We're continuing to see software vendors shifting to a pay-per-use model instead of buying the software outright. And so having to pay for monthly or annual has increased our software and is something that we're continuing to see costs increasing. Again, Anna continues to be really diligent about seeking that. We also are hearing that hardware costs are going to be potentially impacted by tariff policies and that we could see increases in computer costs from 2 to 44%. It's 2%. We're continuing to see cybersecurity insurance costs rising. This year wasn't too bad, but as the amount of issues with phishing and ransomware attacks, we're continuing to see the insurance companies increasing. You may recall from a few months ago when we saw our health insurance costs increase dramatically, and next year they're projected to be 6.5 to 9%. One of the things that we are working on, of course, is Becky's review of all of our health insurance so that we can try and mitigate those costs both for staff and for the library. The health benefit costs are the highest they've been in 15 years. So it's definitely, and it's not just libraries. And then, of course, as we've already mentioned, we have a number of facility projects that we're going to be wanting to be working on, from the BAS system to the larger stuff with the master plan. Anna has done a really good job of continuing to put money into the capital improvement fund, but we are in an aging building. In terms of things that we're working on more locally with our strategic plan, we have a number of things that could impact finances. We are going to need to have a new internet service provider, which we've mentioned. We don't yet know what the costs are. Anna is working with OSG on that, but we do know that the cost we were getting was really, really good. So we know that that cost is going to definitely be increasing. A lot of our strategic plan has to do with our community engagement and our programming. That we're not expecting to need any significant changes. We're not seeing anything from performers, knock on wood, of like massive increases in costs. a lot of the marketing and stuff we're doing, the typical stuff, we're seeing newsletter costs increasing a little bit. The biggest additional costs we're going to be seeing, I think, in the coming years is in terms of our website after the build, what those costs will be. And we also are, doing a fair amount around security. With all of the security RFPs that Kelly is working on, what we don't yet know is what the long-term costs are going to be for the maintenance for those. And we won't know that until we get the RFPs and start seeing what systems we're going to have in place. So that's just something to for us to keep in the back of our head. So those are all things that are impacting us and just to kind of consider as we think about how much money we will need for the coming year.
Given that, do you have a recommendation?
I do. My recommendation is that we go with a 4.8% increase to keep pace with rising costs while staying responsible.
And the board is not voting tonight. This is just to give feedback so we can bring it back next month for a vote.
Sorry, the 4.6 or the?
Oh, 4.6, yes, sorry. Yeah, sorry, 4.8.
But actually,
I cannot be.
And I.
yeah, right.
That matches what we did last year. 4.6.
Six was not sure.
Any other questions, scenarios you'd like to see?
Yeah, if you'd like me to bring any other type of information next month.
And just to add a fun little, someone was telling me today about Oak Park, and they brought a 4.7 increase to the board, and the board said, that's not high enough. And they brought an 11% increase, and the board said, that's still not high enough. I'm like, that is bonkers. We won't ever do that. So just FYI.
Would the 4.6% increase meet the needs that, or meet the environment that Kate was just describing?
I believe so. I mean, I did map it out and looked at costs from prior years. So I did do like a budget, but yeah, so I do feel that it would give us what we need.
Would it, so you were describing sort of the
Worst case.
the known
Yeah,
unknown?
known and, yeah.
Would the 4.6 meet the unknown unknowns of a business environment that is, I don't think, I know in my own line of work, we do not have great clarity around what next year is going to look like.
I mean, I don't have the magic.
It's like an impossible
the
question.
ball
Yeah.
to the
Magic ball, crystal
ball to know, but I think that it would set us up to be able to handle the unknown when they come to us.
And
And
Anna,
if you said 0,
I mean, we'd make it work, but it would be.
right. I mean, I don't want to ask for too much, but I don't want to ask for too little. I do think that 4.6 will put us in a sweet spot.
Anna and I last week went to Northbrook Bank and Trust Economic Outlook presentation, and there isn't any certainty anywhere.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think Anna's very good though at estimating and has done a really good job of positioning us not only with our levies, but also with our fund balance, so that if we do run into issues like we are right now, where the county hasn't issued the tax bills yet, like we're not biting our nails, worrying, how are we going to pay for stuff? Like we're in a very stable financial position.
And that's respectful to the community as well. So, yeah.
Thank you. Any other feedback for Anna? Great, see you in October. Okay. Moving on to 8.5, the Class 6B request for 3100 to 3150 commercial ad. So just as a reminder, and I know that this is a new one for Bryce and Adam, maybe even for Janet as well. Have we had it?
Yeah.
6B? Okay. So The county offers a tax incentive to businesses that meet one of a number of criteria. It's, you know, are in a certain area, a building has been empty for a certain number of years. The county is the one who approves the tax incentive. The county asks the villages in which the community, in which the building is located for their feedback. The village, before they give their feedback, turns to all the other units of local government that receive taxes and ask for their input. So we are giving input to the village, who will then give input to the county, who will be the final arbiter. The only thing that you guys are really voting on tonight is if you have a formal, like, yes, we think this is a good idea. No, we think this is a horrible idea. And these are the reasons that I would then send over to the village to give to their board for them to consider as they consider what their recommendation is. If that makes sense. So there's nothing, yes, you are sharing your feedback, but there's nothing binding about any decision you make around this. It is merely an opportunity to give input. Does anyone have feedback?
As far as I could tell, it was a vacant part of a building. Even with the tax B incentive would be generating more tax than it is now.
I guess my only question was for Anna, maybe just is there a significant impact to the library one way or another as far as funds?
And I mean, right now, we're not getting anything, so
Yep,
we would be getting
fair.
something if they get this.
Yeah. I will also point out that of the 4,000 plus businesses in our community, only about under 100 have library cards. 40% of our property taxes come from businesses, 60% from residential. And so they are providing a significant portion of our budget, but their use is significantly less than what the residents have. So I always see it as a net win.
Do you need anything from us?
If you guys want to say that you support the support, offering the incentive, you can say that. You can also say that there is no feedback one way or another. You can also say that you think it's a horrible idea. So if you would like to formally say, we usually do a vote, and Stacy has a couple motions. And then I write a letter to the village saying this is what I want, so.
I move that we support
Okay,
this request.
Great. Is there a second? Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? Motion passes. Great. We're not going into closed session. Agenda building for October includes data analysis, professional development support proposal. Approving, should this be the fiscal year 27 levy? You two have different years.
Yeah,
Okay. Approving the fiscal.
no,
We're in 25.
nope,
Didn't Anna
yes,
say 27?
no.
Can someone tell me what the fiscal year?
What year is it now? Right
It's-
now, it's 2025.
Right, but it's for fiscal year 27.
Sorry, I wrote the wrong year. You're right. We're in 2025, so we're
So it's-
asking for the money, which we will get in.
I'm confused too. I'm like, what is it? 20?
Okay, great.
I always write the wrong year. I apologize.
Okay, we caught it before we passed anything.
Yeah.
That would have been a mess. Review the RFP, I don't know, actually would have been, review the RFP recommendation for access control for capita grant requirements with a review of the serving our public standards, because those are being updated, and a quarterly strategic plan report check-in. Is there anything anyone else would like to add to the agenda for October?
Is there going to be any activity regarding the Code of Public Policy? Or-
Not next month, November.
Okay.
Unless the board would like an update on how the process is going, I'll add something in my written report.
That's fine.
Is that just like, no, I'm good.
Anything else? Great, and we will adjourn at 9:32.